An international rights group has criticized Saudi Arabia for failing to address, quote, the dire human rights situation in the kingdom. Amnesty International says Riyadh has failed not only to implement any of the recommendations by the UN Human Rights Council, but has increased the brutal repression of its own citizens. Amnesty International's regional director says a paper has been submitted to the UN rights body highlighting arbitrary arrests, detentions, unfair trials, torture, and other ill treatment in the oil-rich kingdom. Philip Luther has called on the international community to make the Saudi regime accountable for violating the rights of its minority Shia community and migrant workers. He says Shia Muslims are being targeted for participating in anti-government demonstrations and for views which are critical of the state. Amnesty has also condemned the systematic discrimination against women in the ultra-conservative kingdom, including a ban on women driving. We're now joined by Legal Affairs editor, Mr. Edward Spinaus, who's with us from Leesburg. Sir, welcome to the program. Let's jump right in and get your thoughts on this recent report from Amnesty International regarding the rights situation in the Saudi kingdom.
Well, to my knowledge, everything that Amnesty says in this case is true. Saudi Arabia does have one of the worst human rights records in the world. It's one of the most backward regimes in the world. And it gets away with this. It's able to do this because of its alliance, long-standing alliance of decades, with the United States and with the British. This is something that goes back with the British to the pre-World War I period in the 1920s, with the United States later, really got cemented in the 70s and 1980s. And today you have a very firm alliance between the United States and Saudi Arabia, against Iran, of course, against Syria, and against almost everybody in the region except Israel. And so this is why I think Saudi Arabia gets away with this.
Mr. Spinaus, can you also mention the fact that all these violations by the Saudi kingdom have somehow managed to be ignored by Western countries, specifically their main allies, and that being the United States, which is the so-called flag bearer of democracy in the free world?
Well, that's not surprising. If the Saudis can be implicated in the 9/11 attacks, terrorist attacks inside the United States, as they were and are, it's not surprising that the United States, the ruling circles here, as well as the British, will give them a free hand on terrorism, will give them a pass. They get away with much worse. You look at what's going on right now in Syria, the atrocities underway there by the so-called rebels, the al-Nusra Front, the al-Qaeda-linked groups. These are all backed by the Saudis. So this is not surprising.
All right, thank you very much. Legal Affairs Editor of EIR, Mr. Edward Spinaus, joining us from Leesburg.